Over the past week, the world came dangerously close to another war in the Middle East, following threats of a US strike on Iran triggered by Tehran's violent crackdown on protesters. However, the escalation appears to have been stopped, at least for now, after intense regional diplomacy. Well, 4 Arab states reportedly took the lead: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman and Egypt. For more than 48 hours, they worked the phones. They spoke to Washington and Tehran, and they delivered a serious message. An American attack on Iran would not stay contained. It would spill across borders, disrupt economies, threaten energy routes, and ultimately hurt the United States itself. Beyond the Gulf, Türkiye also stepped in, calling for dialogue.
We are against a military intervention in Iran. Iran needs to resolve its own internal, authentic problems. Of course, there's also the international dimension to this. What is that? It's subject to sanctions. And why are they subject to sanctions? Because of some of the policies they've pursued, both globally and regionally. We tell them that they need to resolve their problems with regional countries. They must also resolve their global nuclear issues through diplomacy without wasting any opportunity, so that structural problems that cause economic difficulties are eliminated.
Well, the warnings of chaos from long-standing US allies appear to have helped persuade Trump to hold off for the moment on a military assault. But the Arab message did not stop there. They also reportedly warned Iran. Any retaliation against US bases in the Gulf would come at a cost, not just militarily, but diplomatically. In other words, hit American interests and your fragile regional reset collapses. Reports say that the Arab countries actively lobbied Washington. Their focus was clear: lower the temperature, avoid a war and prevent the region from exploding. Well, this strategy also had another supporter. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly asked President Trump to delay any strike. The White House confirmed the call, but said nothing about what was discussed. Well, behind this diplomacy lies a complex regional reality. Iran remains politically distant from Gulf states. It still backs what it calls its axis of resistance, an Iran-led alliance of Middle Eastern groups opposing Israel and the US, and it disputes 3 Gulf islands claimed by the UAE. Yet something has shifted. Iran's Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, has been quietly rebuilding bridges. He had made visits to Bahrain and multiple trips to Cairo. This is the first Iranian outreach of this kind in over a decade. Even Saudi-Iran ties, once toxic, have been thawing for 3 years. The Gulf states are also keenly aware that Iran can choke maritime traffic in the Gulf, and that would hurt everyone. Meanwhile, in Washington, the Trump administration added pressure on Iran without missiles. On Thursday, the US imposed sanctions on Iranian security officials, and then came a claim and a warning. A claim that Iran had, under US pressure, halted 800 executions related to the anti-government protests, and a warning that the US is still keeping all options on the table.
The truth is, only President Trump knows what he's going to do, and a very, very small team of advisors are read into his thinking on that. And as I just told you, he continues to closely monitor the situation on the ground in Iran. And as we saw yesterday, he had heard that the killings and executions would stop. And we have seen 800 people, their lives have been spared as a result of that. The president continues to closely monitor, but also keep all of his options on the table.
So where does this leave us? Well, the military intervention by the US in Iran seems less likely. More sanctions and diplomacy are back on the table, but how long will this restraint on all sides actually last? Well, to get some more perspective on this, we're now joined by Eli Al-Hindi. He's a professor of international relations. He joins us live now from Dubai. Welcome to the program. So overall, how important is the role of other countries in the Middle East when it comes to attempts to diffuse the situation over Iran?
Definitely, it's very important because all the countries that are in direct surrounding of Iran, but also in the broader Middle East, will be directly affected by any instability that is in Iran. Whether it leads to the fall of the regime or not, an instability is not welcomed by any of the surrounding countries, especially countries like Gulf countries who have built all their credibility and all their strategy on stability, economic prosperity, and openness of all pathways for trade and other things.
But despite this, of course, the White House would still say that all options remain on the table.
Definitely. I think the US is in between allies, let's say, because we know very clearly, and they have announced it very clearly, that the Israeli government is very keen on having that hit happen and actually on changing the regime. While, as we said, Arab countries, mostly the Gulf countries, are much more hesitant in the consequences of a potential regime change. So in between these two, Trump seems to be weighing all options and keeping all options on the table to potentially choose what is most suitable for the US specifically and what could achieve the best results for the US foreign policy in the region. If the regime is actually able to offer Trump what he is expecting, let's say, in specific the change of behavior in the region and so on, he will definitely try to avoid a war, especially that he has built all his campaign trail on the fact that we are not in the business of regime change, we are not in the business of opening never-ending wars.
Given what you say then, what are the main factors, especially internally, that may determine whether the Iranian leadership survives these protests as it has done in the past?
Internally within Iran, definitely there's the factor of how much this regime still holds popularity. And we have seen in any credible references or statistics that have been done that the regime has significantly lost support among its own population. So this is the first factor. If this continues, holding on to the regime and holding the population back would be definitely more and more difficult. The level of violence that is used and how the people will react to this violence is also something to be seen. As we go back to the relation with other countries, will this regime be able to promise at least the US and other partners in the region that they will change a behavior, they will stop supporting militias, they will stop threatening and developing their ballistic missiles, they will be ready to consider the offer of the US on the nuclear deal. All of these factors, I think, will lead to whether a stronger intervention and stronger encouragement by the international community for these protesters, or unfortunately, the regime will be able to gain some time and then the protesters would be left alone to their destiny, as we have seen in the past few days.
Elliot Al-Hindi, we appreciate your expertise. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
The world doesn't fit in boxes, so why should your news? From battlefields to negotiation tables, from internet outrage to real-world injustice. The conversations everyone is having and the ones they're avoiding. It's the same show, but this new year, Firstpost America gets a new look. I'm Cary Johnston, and this is Firstpost America.